I've spoken with Mark Jamieson about his experience with outsourcing, and Mark is from the opinion that outsourcing is about finding a partner that can bring value to you and your business in a cost-effective way, and not necessarily just shipping business overseas. He also mentioned that we should do A/B tests with outsourcing companies as well to figure out which one works best for you. And also the fact that we should not launch new projects on Fridays. Hello, Ederson Oliveira here. This is another interview for the Outsourcing podcast, where I talk to business owners, specialists, professionals about outsourcing and how outsourcing impact their business and how to do outsourcing properly. And that's the reason why I have with me Mark Jamieson. Mark is the president and managing partner at WSI Strategies. Mark, thank you very much for being here.
Good morning, Anderson, and thank you for having me.
Perfect. Mark, let's start with the basics. The basics is, where are you located and what is your business about?
Yeah, well, thank you, Anderson. We're located here in Canada's nation's capital of Ottawa, and WSI Strategies is a internet marketing company specializing mainly in search engine marketing, web design, social media marketing, and content marketing.
Perfect. And again, it's one more interview with a WSI consultant. Why WSI? Why I bring so many WSI consultants? Because WSI, a key aspect of what WSI does is about outsourcing. So I said, why not bring all those professionals, those business owners that understand a lot about outsourcing? I'm just trying to cover here why. So, Mark, how does outsourcing applies to your business?
Yeah, I think it's it's economics at the end of the day. As the agency has grown over the last 4 years, starting out, we realized that initially simply finding the right talent was a little harder than it seemed. Outsourcing was a way for us to sub out. I don't want to say the word sub out. It was just a way to really get the work done in a cost-effective way that really helped us grow our business. It helped us keep our margins down. It helped us keep our cost to create significantly lower than a lot of the other agencies may have. And initially what it did is, and what we realized really early on, Anderson, is that for the SMBs out there, they understand the importance of marketing. I don't think, anybody out there can really say that marketing is not something that we need to do. What typically stops them from really moving ahead is the finances, it's the financials. And, some of the larger agencies out there really have to price high to cover their overhead, cover their costs, cover that staff of 30, 40, 50, 60, or even 100 people within. You got to keep that machine going. Outsourcing really allowed us to keep our costs down. And it wasn't a selfish means. It really was a way that we can translate that back to the client. So it helped us close more deals. It helped us get more SMBs into the marketing game and, do it at a reasonable rate for them where everybody was happy. We made some money, they saved some money, and they're able to help grow their business earlier on.
Got it. When I was thinking about, what to ask, what not to ask, I said, what? I would like to understand if there is, how would your business look like without that outsourcing component added to it? How would it look like if you'd have a business at all?
Yeah, I think starting out, if we had an outsource, I fear that, we may not be in the position that we are today. We're at a point now where, obviously there are certain things that we still outsource, and I'm not going to lie to you, there's certain things that we absolutely do not outsource. We keep completely in-house. We just need to keep that element of control. But, if we were really coming in and hiring the right talent internally, paying the salaries that needed to be done to do the job properly, like any other growing business, we needed to acquire. We need to bring in more customers to be able to feed that machine. Outsourcing helped us do it. So I can honestly say if we hadn't outsourced in the beginning in that first 24 months, I don't think the business would have gotten off the ground the way it has today.
Got it. You mentioned there's something that you said, there are things that we don't outsource. What do you don't outsource and why?
Why? Let's look at something like web development, for example. One thing that we noticed that for a lot of the SMBs, and I think if you look at the numbers out there, the average cost of a website could be $10, $12, $15,000. For a lot of the smaller businesses, that's too much. So we found that outsourcing gave us an edge where we were to come in and accommodate some of those smaller businesses. On the fundamentals, on the technical side, outsourcing really works here. Where we found that it didn't work was on the creative. Creative is something that really is personal to the client. We bring our creative team in, talk to the customers, get an idea of their company, their culture, and at that point, creative we do in-house, and then we bring that over to the outsourcing team for them to implement. So, something like that is something that we completely keep because it's very personal. It takes a direct relationship with the end user, with the client. So that is a good example of something that we absolutely would not outsource. We tried it. We just felt that, the quality wasn't what we were looking for. And at the end of the day, we put our name on everything. So it needs to be 100%.
Got it. So when you say creative, which areas specifically about creative do you mean? Is that advertising? Is that logo, brand design? What are those creative areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Creative can be anywhere between the graphic design. It could be the brand identity for the end user, for the client. It can be, the way things are laid out. So normally what we would do, for example, with a website, our creative team would really draw the mock-ups, get an idea of exactly what we're looking for, bring in the design elements, colors, logos, whatever it may be, and then bring that over to the outsourcing team, and then they can add the technical to it, right? And then, they can just kind of fidget around, do what needs to be done with it, bring it back to us. We can at that point bring it back to the client, get their okay, make a few tweaks, and off we are.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you come about picking and selecting which provider, which partner you work with. Can you tell us a little bit about your process of selecting a partner, an outsourcing partner?
Sure. I think, Anderson, and that's a great question. And I think, even for us, this is, the one part about outsourcing that is what might turn any business off. Like anything else, it's a lot of trial and error. I think more importantly, before we would even talk to a third-party agency or to a development team that might not be controlled in-house by us, references. We're looking at references, we're looking at reputation, et cetera. Like any other shopping around, you're not going to hire a contractor, without doing your due diligence. So, we would do our due diligence, get an idea, ask for referrals, talk to other businesses that use them, find out how the culture was and the relationship was. So we really took our time there. I think for WSI, one of the big edges we have is because of the sheer size of our network. And again, as you know, Anderson, we're over 1,000 consultants in 80 countries. We were able to reach out to some of the veterans who've been at it for 10, 12, 15, 20 years and get some feedback, find out what agencies or third-party or outsourcing areas work well for them, which ones did not. And obviously we capitalized on that.
Got it. Okay, that's great. I mean, you have a network, so why not just leverage that and get referrals from people that have come prior to you, So now a little bit more on the relationship with outsourcing partner. What does pisses you off when dealing with outsourcing partners? What is it?
Well, I love that you use that language. What pisses us off the most, obviously, is control. You do, as soon as you outsource, you are eliminating a certain amount of control that you may have in-house. I think that was maybe more prominent, 3, 5, 7 years ago. Technology today is so advanced and elaborate that realistically, look at us, we're 400 miles away, but you're next door, right? We were able to implement the right tools to allow us to really communicate strongly with, whatever production centers that we may be using. But I think initially, obviously, depending on, whether it's time zones that may not be in the same areas you're in, that can be an issue. Every once in a while, you may get a call from the client that says, hey, we need some help immediately with this. And unfortunately, we're at a point now where 99.9% of the time we do have the talent in-house to accommodate, but starting out initially, we did not have that. So there could be some lags. So somebody wants something done now, it may have to wait till tomorrow. So, these are the things that irritated me a little bit with outsourcing. So I think, there's some pros and cons definitely to outsourcing. My opinion is the pros definitely outweighs the cons, but this was definitely one of them. Was, response time can sometimes lag. Communication, sometimes things would not be communicated properly, either back and forth. So there's some cost and expense to starting over, for example, if something wasn't done right the first time, where you may have had a better opportunity to keep a closer eye, let's say if it was in-house. So I think, really the big thing on that end would be simply a little bit of the control that you do have to keep up. I'm a control guy. I like knowing what's going on in my business. So that was always a tough one to swallow.
Got it. So let me probe a little bit more on that. So it seems to me that you use outsource and you still use outsource a lot, but the trend is to bring things in house. Is that your trend?
I don't think it's so much our trend is to bring things in house. I just think, over the years, we've been able to figure out what things are just better managed in house compared to what things are better done outsourced. Let's look at, we're an internet marketing company, which is extremely content driven, for example. So, let's look at content, for example. I'm working with, 30 different industries. To have a content writer in-house, for example, or 2 content writers or 3 content writers writing for all these different businesses, it's impossible. They don't have the knowledge, so we outsource content all the time. Why? Because we can find people who write specifically for these verticals. For us to keep this in-house, it's impossible. And for agencies that do, typically what happens is the content seems to be fluffy, very surface, whereas when we outsource this, we can get stuff done that's, a little bit deeper, has some better meaning, and is really more applicable to the end user's business at the end of the day. So content would be another area that we definitely and will always outsource.
Let me ask a question about content, because based on previous interviews, I see the trend that content, yes, you can outsource content, but it's usually better to keep content closer to where the client is. I mean, if you outsource content, let's say, to the Philippines or to India, maybe they don't have the same context as required here. So your content strategy in terms of outsourcing, is that to outsource locally to North America? Is that it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think it's important for all the viewers to understand that when we talk about outsourcing, we're not always talking about the Philippines or India.
Yes.
And I think this is where, as soon as you say I outsource, especially in our industry, all of a sudden, you're remembering the 18 emails you got last night from, India asking you to, get on the first page of Google for $99. It's not, this is not what we're talking about here. So when it comes to content, for example, I would say 80% of the content writers that we outsource are not only in North America, but in our case, they're here in Ontario. So they understand the geography, they understand the location. We have content writers who we use in Ottawa. We have, one of our #1 content writers that we use for, I'd say, probably about 30% of our businesses right now is located in Belleville, not too far from where you are, Addison. We have some content writers in the US and Florida. We have, but honestly, I have never to this date outsourced content in India or the Philippines, because common sense here is we're going to have language barriers and issues. So, I think it's important. Can you outsource tech to the Philippines or to India? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Phenomenal work, as long as you find the right people to do it.
Got it. No, it all makes sense. I mean, if we're talking about, I guess, a global language where it doesn't matter where you are, like technology, then why not? But again, if it's something that brings culture in place as well, then you're better off with your next door neighbor,
No, absolutely. And, if I had a local business here whose demographic was a different culture, then I would be outsourcing that content to the right person. Okay. So, the beauty about outsourcing is, once you know where to look and how to find it and how to validate it, there's definitely sky's the limits, and at the end of the day, it almost always translates into significant savings, which we can then really pass on to the client, which I think at the end of the day is, what we're happy with.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, what is it? I would assume that in the many years that you have as experience there, Mark, you may have come across providers that you had to fire them, you had to let go because things were not working out that well. Now, what is it that you don't forgive from an outsourcing partner?
Well, I'm a man of my word, so when you tell me you're going to do something, and, I understand that delays happen all the time, we're very careful in the way that we source out our projects and who we use. What I won't forgive is sheer laziness, so if you honestly promise me, I'm not a forgiving person. At the end of the day, our name has to go on it, and our clients have a certain expectation. So, in the beginning, outsourcing actually was a bit costly for us because we had to fire people. You know what I mean? We would be giving some money up, work would get done, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into it. This is not quite what we thought, and we had to pull the plug. That would cost us money, and then we would have to start over. So, initially that was a little tough to swallow, but that's just part of the, if you're going to outsource, you're going to have to A/B test and try different people until you find what works and what doesn't work. So I am not forgiving when it comes to not abiding by your word. We're very meticulous in the way that we source our projects. We have timelines, we have to-dos, we're very clear with the production centers or who is going to be doing our projects and what needs to be done. It just needs to get done. I'm giving my word to a client. They're signing a contract. I'm signing a contract. At the end of the day, we need to assure that it gets done. So, I'm not forgiving. I don't give a lot of second chances. And, if I get screwed, we're done.
One time. I love what you said there. The A/B testing of outsourcing providers. I love that. That might be the title of our interview. Love that. Let me ask you this, Mark. So you said, okay, you don't forgive, and you're very strict, and again, not too many second chances there, but problems happen. I had to call clients that I say, hey, you know what? We may get delayed here for a week. So what is the proper way of addressing a potential delay on one of your projects? What is the right way to do that?
Sure. And I think, whether you're outsourcing or whether, we're working internally, and again, we still have, a lot of internal work that gets done. Not everything we do is outsourced. Problems happen, delays happen, unforeseens happen, unexpecteds happen. That's business, as much as, we strive for perfection and we hope everything's going to run smoothly 100% of the time. That's 100% never the case. Right. And I think anybody who's been in business for more than 30 days realizes that. So, as long as, there is a certain amount of transparency from the partners that we're using, if there's an issue, right now we have very good relationships with the partners that we use. So if we're seeing problems, or maybe if even they made a promises, we did not see this coming. Honestly, Mark, we may have to up our cost a little bit. If it's reasonable, I'm okay with it. If it's out to lunch, and absolutely not. If an issue is happening, then definitely, as long as the production center who's doing the work, takes responsibility and ensures it gets fixed. I think that is really the nature of a true professional. Whether, you're in the production side, you're on the agency side like us, I can never look legitimately at a client in the eye and say mistakes are never going to happen. But as long as you're transparent, you suck it up, you own your mistakes, and you make it right, you know what? I'm fine with that. That's just business, So on that end, we understand mistakes are going to happen. The relationships that we have with any third-party companies that we use to do some of our projects, to this date have been fantastic. If we can't meet a timeline, we're honest with the client. We'll let them know there'll be a short delay. But I don't think to this date yet we've had delays that have really affected, our clients financially, or have really impacted our end results. So, we're talking delays could be a week, 2 weeks. I think that's within, the norm of this business.
I really think, Mark, that one of the key elements of outsourcing is having, and I keep insisting on that, is having good communication, not only from the provider to you, but from you to your clients. Good communication all throughout, because if you have clear communication, you can identify those problems up front instead of it's supposed to be delivered tomorrow and it's not delivered tomorrow. Why? Why didn't you tell me this a week ago or 2 days ago?
Absolutely. And, you know, and a lot of it sometimes is on your end too. Are you giving them the right information and everything that they need to be able to test things in advance before, you know, maybe we're up to a launch date? You know, I was told early on in this business when we started, one of the first biggest investments that you're going to make is making sure that you have the right project management team internally to do the job right. And then, you know, we took that to heart. You know, we have phenomenal project managers right now, and they are on top. Any outsourcing that is getting done, you know, it's daily communication. You know, we're set up, you know, in the base camps, you know, they have the to-dos. We're able to test here internally, make sure things have been done. You know, so right now it's just a well-oiled machine. And, you know, we're talking to the production teams, regardless of where they are, if they're here local in Ottawa, if they're in Toronto, if they're in the States. And yes, sometimes they are overseas, and that's okay. You know, as long as the communication is consistent and constant, there's not a day that goes by that our production teams or that our project management teams are not in clear and concise communication with, you know, any outside agencies that could be doing work for us. So simply it works. You know, I think we're living in an era now, and I mentioned this earlier, where technology is so fantastic. Even our own internal teams that we have here, most of the time they work remotely. They don't need to be in the office anymore. They can get more done. You know, they don't have to be, you know, dealing with the traffic and, you know, the extra expenses. So the beauty about technology is, you know, whether you're sitting beside me or you're at the office, you know, across the hall, it doesn't matter that much today. You know, it can simply get done just the way that we're doing it right now.
Perfect. You're right. You're right. You mentioned there Basecamp, and I want to ask you a little bit about the tools that you have in your tool belt to communicate with outsourcing partners, with within the team. Tell me a little bit of your tool belt there.
Yeah, so, you know, Basecamp again, you know, kind of like a CRM tool where, you know, we can give, you know, set up a nice platform. So, you know, if you were to look at our Basecamp right now, we can have 60, 70 projects lined up in it or different clients. And, you know, we can give access to any third parties to access those projects. Our internal team creates the to-dos. Messaging goes out. We can communicate via video. We can just simply communicate through Basecamp. But it's a nice area where everything gets compounded. Communication is done through Basecamp. Nothing gets lost. You know, there's no piecemeals through emails, you know, for this, here, there. You know, everything is in a nice, tight little wrap bow for us. So, you know, if we have to go back and take a look at something or, you know, see if this communication has been responded to, you know, assigning to-dos, assigning, you know, deadlines for things to get done, you know, it's really straightforward. It's really easy. So, you know, that's a phenomenal tool. Go-to meetings like we're doing right now. You know, this is something that we use constantly. We even use it with our clients. You know, we have clients in different cities. Hell, we have clients in different countries. You know, I'm not flying out every 3 days to have a conversation. So we use these tools to communicate. So simply, it works.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. Going back here to the main point, the main topic, outsourcing. What is it that you don't outsource currently, but just because you didn't get a chance yet? I mean, it's something that say, hey, you know, we have to stop doing this and I need to ship this off to somebody else. What is it?
You know,
anything?
I'm going to think on that one for a second. It's a great question. What don't we outsource right now that we've considered outsourcing? You know, we do. I think at this point, we've just really figured it out. You know, we figured out what we need to do internally. We figured out, you know, what's better off being outsourced. And, you know, in a sense, you know, if, you know, all businesses are different, you know, but if you look at a business like ours, digital marketing, as you know, Addison, there's a lot of moving parts. You know, there could be a month where we can have 20 websites on the go, but there could be a month or 2 or 3 that we just don't. Right? Because that's just not what's happening. You know, so to keep a web developer on staff for 3 months and not doing anything, that just doesn't make sense, right? It's not good business. So things that, you know, we don't outsource right now, I think, is the project management side of anything. And I don't think I ever would. You know, I think it's just something that we need to keep internal. I would rather have, you know, 10 project managers internally in my house, but outsource all our web development just because, it just makes more sense to do it that way. So, what are we doing internally right now that we should outsource? I don't think I have an answer for that at this point, because
Perfect.
I think we've
That makes
just
sense.
really
I mean,
figured out the line that works and how it doesn't work at this point. Yeah.
no problem, no problem. So, moving on here, one of the ways we learn as people, businesses, professionals is with our mistakes.
Absolutely.
And I would like to ask you, if you are open to that, to talk a little bit about a horror story. That's how I call those situations that either, and I'm trying to the horror story here with an outsourcing partner, because that's the context that we're talking about. So any horror story that you can get to specific details that you can share with us, that you are open to that?
I'll share some horror stories. I'm not going to share specific names. But I'll use, early on when we started, we had a fairly large web development project to be done that, had an internal payment system, for example, that really needed to be created from scratch. And, we needed to ensure that it was working. Early on when we started, we were vetting out some, different agencies for web development. At that time, we just didn't have enough web jobs coming in that warranted to have somebody on staff doing it. So we outsourced a lot of our web work, and we still do. Even though we could bring in, our own web developers, we still outsource it just because it makes sense. But nonetheless, it was during a peak season, during a holiday, and all of a sudden the whole payment system went down. And clients calling us and yelling at us because, they're losing money minute after minute after minute because people can't make these online purchases. Yes, we'll get it fixed right away for you. Contacted the company who had built the website, and they were nowhere to be found. You know what I mean? We just could not get a hold of them on time. Everybody was on holidays. Big issue. So this is, where outsourcing can be problematic, right? So we're lucky enough now, and again, this was earlier on when we were building the business, we're at a point now where we have always somebody in-house that if these things were to happen, we do have the talent internally that can address it right away. But nonetheless, this was one of the big horror stories where the client was losing hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars over the course of 4 days for something that we just couldn't get fixed. You know what I mean? So
and so
it was scary, and and we had to make it up to the client financially, and that hurt.
Yeah. Got it. So I was about to ask, how did you mitigate the situation at that point?
Yeah, you suck it up, right? At the end of the day, it's there's pros and cons to everything, and you hope everything's going to be 100% all the time, but it's not always the case. So yeah, we had to give back, and it cost us some pennies, but nonetheless, client was okay, and to this date, this client is actually still a client. So and that was over 3 years ago. Really, the only horror story that I've had to date with any types of outsourcing. So I think based on the amount of work that we do and that we have done, odds are in our favor right now.
Got it. Okay, so I tend to think that situation of having a partner that did whatever development was done, and the client having a problem in a time that is not appropriate for the outsourcing partner to work on. I mean, I don't think that this is too unusual. How do you mitigate this currently? I mean, I would assume that you may come across situations like that again. So how do you mitigate that now?
You do. We've learned by our lessons, and, certain projects launch at certain times, and there are certain days of the week and certain times of the month when we would never launch a project just in case, right? So we're very careful now, and, it's not for everything, but let's look at web development, for example. Never launch a website on a Friday.
Of course. That's my number one rule.
Number one rule, right? But, when you're starting out, you don't know this, so we've launched many websites on a Friday in the past, and all hell breaks loose. So here's a really good example of, living and learning. You don't launch certain things over the holidays. You need time to test. And, I think as long as you, try to launch your projects, and especially if they've been outsourced, you really pick and choose when it's the best time. Ensure you have time to do any testing, fix any issues. And listen, I've been doing this a long time now, and nothing's ever perfect. We've never launched a website that hasn't had at least one or two little glitches that needed to be addressed within the first few hours, few days of being launched. It's normal, and that's the industry, which is why, we're very careful now on how we do it. And, we make sure, we set our dates, we set our targets, we set our times. We know when to do it, we know when not to do it. We don't have problems anymore.
Got it. Okay. So, Mark, we are coming towards the end here. I'd like you to think through for a second and tell me one thing that you like people that have gone through this conversation to leave this conversation knowing about outsourcing, knowing more, or now I know about this. So one thing, pick one thing.
Sure. I think coming back to what we said earlier, outsourcing does not necessarily mean you're taking your business overseas. It's not what we're talking about here. Outsourcing is just really about finding partners that can bring value back to your business in a cost-effective manner. And again, we got to look at it this way. For us to keep certain elements on staff 5 days a week throughout the year is just not possible because, again, so many moving parts. And all businesses are like that. You have so many moving parts, need so much different talent. You just can't always have all that talent in-house all the time. So really, this is where establishing those proper channel partners, outsourcing, for us, for example, content, certain tech on the web development, strategy, that stays in-house. You know what I mean? There's no way we would ever outsource strategy or get recommendations from outside parties. We're very, very confident in how we stay updated in our industry. So strategy is always something that's done here. So don't fear outsourcing. I think it's a very cost-effective way of doing business, regardless of where you outsource it. It's value added that you can bring back to your end user. In our industry, one of the biggest problems with the biggest agencies out there is they really have to charge big dollars, because they got to keep that cog, they got to keep that machine moving 24/7. The beauty about outsourcing is that it's ad hoc. When you need it, you have it, right? When you don't need it, guess what? You're not paying for it. So it's great. So it's added value back to the client. We can typically always come in a little less expensive than the larger agencies because there's certain things that we can outsource. So don't fear it, but do your due diligence. It's like anything else. You have to shop around. You have to build that relationship. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but they're no different than the ups or downs you're going to have internally with your staff. It's just hiring the right people. You hire the right people, it works. You hire the wrong people, it doesn't work. Whether you're outsourcing, whether you're doing it in-house, I think it just applies. So smart business people, just do what's best for the end user. Remember, your name is always going on it. And again, as I mentioned, I'm not a forgiving person. So, you can fool me once, but you won't fool me twice, and just be safe.
Very good, Mark. A lot of value that you have provided here. I really like the honesty, the openness. And again, thank you very much. Before I let you go, please let us know how can people reach out to you if they have more questions or if they may want to engage with your business and with yourself, please.
Absolutely. Anytime, and I'm always here to answer any questions, whether it's about outsourcing, whether it's about digital marketing, whether it's a lead generation for your business. You can reach me directly at the office, 613-424-7042. Our website is www.wsiestrategies.com, or you can email me directly at mjamieson, that's JAMIESON, at strategies.com.
Perfect. So as usual, all the links, all the details, the sites that were mentioned in the interview during the conversation will be added to the show notes. Once again, Mark, thank you very much for your time, for your knowledge, and for your willingness to share that with us. Bye.
Madison, my pleasure, and let's do it again soon.